Mangaka are strange public figures in that they aren't public at all. Sure, if I show you guys this picture and ask you who this is, there's a chance that a lot of you guessed correctly that it is Junji Ito. He's done interviews that people come over recording him work and even reacted to cat videos on YouTube. But not everyone is like that. Oichi, for example, had a YouTube channel, but his face and voice were covered up. And while we're still on YouTube, the other day I saw a video of Inaki Godoy, the actor that does Luffy in the One Piece live action, meeting with Ichiro Oda, the author of One Piece, and Oda's face was covered up. And that is someone that we have genuine confirmed photos of. We know how he looks like, or to be more specific, we know how he looked like 20 years ago. But since the rise in popularity of his manga, Oda has become much more secretive, and that is more common than you think. Fujimoto, Gege, and Gotoji, the authors of Chainsaw Man, Jujutsu Kaisen, and Demon Slayer respectively, all cover their faces during any of their public appearances. We don't even know the sex of Gotoji, which is why it's heavily speculated that they might be female. We know very little of these people, but there is one person that goes one step further. Tsugumi Ohba, the author of Death Note, for all intents and purposes, does not exist. There's very little that we know about him. We know that that's basically a pen name, a stand-in for someone, but who that someone is, we don't know. We know that he wrote Death Note, Bakuman, and Platinum End, all with his partner Takeshi Obata, who, contrary to Ohba, has done multiple appearances over the years. We know that the name is fake. It's actually a pun that I'll explain later on in this video. And the views claim that they were born in Tokyo, which I think we can believe, and the videos also claim that they are essentially L, that they are odd, that they sit and behave just like the character in that manga, which I honestly don't think we can believe. And we also know that they are represented by this picture. We don't know their age, their gender, or even if they worked in the manga industry before Death Note. You have to understand, it's not uncommon or unnatural for mangaka to use different pen names when drawing different styles, but we normally tend to know who they are. For example, we know that before Obata became mainly an artist for Shonen Jump, that he wrote a full gag series under the name Shigeru Jikata. Or for example, the ecchi mangaka Mizuki Kawashita writes shoujo and BL rom-coms with the name Mikan Mamakuri. This information is public. We know these are the same people. So if Tsugumi Ohba was indeed the pen name of some other dude, we should know, right? Well, let's put a pin on that. Pictures. You might think that this video is horribly wrong because there are pictures of Tsugumi Ohba online. If you do a small research, you come up with about 3 or 4 pictures, which isn't a lot, but honestly, it's more or less how many pictures most mangaka tend to have. But these pictures aren't of Tsugumi Ohba. Actually, they aren't of the same person at all. There are at least 3 different people that I've seen pictures of wrongly attributed to be Tsugumi Ohba, and they're all somewhat related to Death Note, so let's talk about them. The first picture is easy. That is Takeshi Obata, the other writer of Death Note. Sure, Obata is bald and has facial hair. Now, this is a picture from before he has chosen the current art style that he does now. He is indeed one of the authors of Death Note, so I can see how people would accidentally use pictures of him when trying to talk about Ohba. The second picture is this one, and this is the one that I find the weirdest because this is Masaoka, the actor. He's mostly known for his role in the TV shows Heroes and Hawaii 5-0. He's also in Get Smart, that Steve Carell movie. And he's also Detective Sasaki in the Netflix adaptation of Death Note, which is also one of the producers. The picture that people tend to use for Tsugumi Ohba is from an interview that he held with Viz about that Death Note movie. You can see it here. And then there's this picture, and this one got me stumped. It's by far the most used picture to represent Tsugumi Ohba, and I tried my damnedest to find who this person really was, and all my research I just end up coming across with pictures of non-official websites that use it as a stand-in to represent Ohba. So I turned to Reddit, and they got it pretty fast. This is Yusaku Tokoyoshima. He works in CG for movies. He's not super well known, but he's worked on a couple of Japanese movies in the visual effects department. And two of them are, of course, the live-action Japanese Death Note movies. Here's a picture of him wearing the exact same shirt near the poster. And all of that returned to the same point, that we don't know who Tsugumi Ohba really is. But there are theories. In this video, I'm going to be talking about 4 of them, focusing on the one that has more clues and honestly is the most interesting one. But first, let's briefly talk the other 3. The first one is the boring and honestly extremely likely theory that it's just someone who doesn't want their public information out there. They were indeed a rookie at the time of Death Note that the editors really liked, and is no one special other than Tsugumi Ohba themselves. The second theory, it's the same theory but a little bit more specific. The idea is that the author of Death Note uses a pen name because they are a woman. The biggest indicator of this is the first name, Tsugumi. While technically a genderless name, it's mostly used as a female one. There are some reasons why I don't buy this, but it is not without some merit. J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, uses her pen name because the editors thought that Joanne Rowling wouldn't sell as much as people realized that the author was a woman. It's not far-fetched to think that the editors of Shonen Jump, a magazine whose main demographic is teenage boys, would think that Death Note would sell less if people knew that it was penned by a woman. I mean, this is the same theory with Kotoge, but we should note that there are publicly female authors in Shonen Jump, and they were running in the magazine at the same time as Death Note. Akira Amano, the author of Reborn, and Mizuki Kawashiro with Ichigo 100%. So while possible, we also know that female authors are allowed in Shonen Jump without having to hide their identity and gender. The reason, however, why I don't really buy this theory is that my main problem, and honestly a lot of people's main problem with Death Note and Bakuman, is indeed the portrayal of female characters. I mean, just go read the motivations of any female character in Bakuman, and then come back to me and tell me with straight face that it was written by a woman. And then the third theory is just that it's actually just Takeshi Obata. There is some sense in this theory, as Ohba mainly worked with Obata, so he could just be pretending to be 2 people. Maybe he doesn't want to be associated with his previous solo works. Maybe he wants to continue to be seen as just the artist, as that's his main gig. I mean, it's kind of a weird coincidence that they both have the same initials, so maybe that is a clue. I don't know. The truth is, Ohba has worked without Obata once for a one-shot with the author Robiko, which is another mangaka that we know pretty much nothing about. They're mostly known for their shoujo manga, My Little Monster. And hell, maybe Ohba is Robiko, who knows at this point. But the fourth theory is the most out there and yet most likely. The theory being that Tsugumi Ohba is actually the 90s Shonen Jump gag mangaka Gamo Hiroshi, the author of the manga Totemo Lucky Man. Why? Well, for that we need to turn to Ohba's second manga, and honestly my personal favorite manga of the duo, Bakuman. The theory goes that if you cover up the bottom part of the title, you can kinda get Rocky Man, which is the pronunciation that the Japanese have of Lucky Man. Ohba is Gamo Hiroshi, confirmed. I'm kidding. Well, kinda. That is part of the theory, but there's a lot more there to indicate that these two are one and the same, or at the very least that they are related to one another. Sure, reading it as Rocky Man is undoubtedly a coincidence, but that is not the only instance of this manga in Bakuman. So before we get into that, let's just dive into what Bakuman is. This manga is about 2 mangaka working together to publish a popular manga in the pages of Weekly Shonen Jump. This manga is universally seen as a representation of Takeshi Obata and Tsugumi Ohba's careers. I mean, their last manga is essentially Death Note. It's a little bit too on the nose to not be. And over the course of the manga, they made a lot of other mangaka, and a good chunk of them are actually based on real-life mangaka. I mean, the main 2 are of course Ohba and Obata. Eiji Nizuma, the boy wonder who took the world by storm and is by far the most popular mangaka through the run of Bakuman, is supposed to represent Eiichiro Oda. The co-writer of this cool manga, Shinta Fukuda, is Tire Kubo of Bleach. Ko Aoki, the female mangaka that moved from shoujo rom-coms in Margaret to ecchi rom-coms in Shonen Jump, is Mizuki Kawashiro, which I've been mentioning a lot in this video, more than I thought I would. And Iramaru Kazuya, the extremely lazy but comically genius gag mangaka, is supposed to represent Hideaki Sorachi, the author of Gintama. And I mean, it makes sense. All of those mangaka had manga running at the exact same time as Death Note, so these will all be rivals and friends. But there is one more mangaka that is represented in the manga that seems to mirror a real-life mangaka. And it's kind of a weird choice. Nobuhiro, the uncle and mentor of Mashiro, the main character who represents Obata, is a failed mangaka from the 90s, responsible for the somewhat popular gag title Superhero Legend. We even got an anime adaptation. Eventually, however, the title was cancelled, and while Nobuhiro worked his ass off to try to get a new series published, he eventually passed away from overexhaustion. More so than any other mangaka and any other manga in Bakuman, Nobuhiro and Superhero Legend clearly mirror Hiroshi Gamo and his manga Totemo Lucky Man. I mean, just look at them side by side, they are the same. Both Nobuhiro and Hiroshi had their gag manga series published in the mid-90s. Both series did get an adaptation before the popularity of the series diminished and they got cancelled. While contrary to Nobuhiro, Hiroshi did get 2 more runs at serialization, both of them were cut very short very soon, with one manga having 2 volumes and the final one only having 1 before getting cancelled as well. Both Nobuhiro and Hiroshi are also described as being horrible at drawing, with Nobuhiro mentioning that he writes gag manga because he draws so badly, and with Hiroshi being named the worst artist in Weekly Shonen Jump history. We don't know much about Gamo Hiroshi nowadays, but at least as far as we know, he retired, he didn't die of exhaustion. But his last manga, Bakabakashi no, was published in 2000 and has been mostly silent for the past 23 years. So the question we should ask is, why? Why out of all the other mangaka did Ohba use Gamo Hiroshi as the model for the mentor for the main character? He could just easily make up a character unrelated to any real mangaka, especially for a character that outright kills at the beginning of the series. The easiest explanation is that there is some relationship between Hiroshi and Lucky Man and Ohba or Obata. And just so we're clear, he's not Obata's uncle. He's just 5 years older than Obata and they ran the magazine together. Actually, Obata was published in Weekly Shonen Jump before Hiroshi, so I don't think Hiroshi was really Obata's mentor figure either, though they could have easily been friends. On the other hand, he's been gone since the 2000s. He was only known for being a bad artist and he only wrote gag manga. Is that weird to think that he decided to grab a new artist to work with, one that he already knew and maybe were even friends? Someone who even started as a gag mangaka just like him, and maybe didn't want to write gag manga anymore. So we decided to start anew, with a different name and a different style. Curiously, just after being cancelled, Nobuhiro claims that he's going to start anew, to try to submit a new manga not as a veteran but as a rookie. And in Bakuman he dies in 2006, kind of like the peak of Death Note. If Ohba is indeed Hiroshi Gamo, the popularity of Death Note probably meant that Gamo was metaphorically dead, replaced by the new rookie Ohba. While the bulk of this series revolves around Nobuhiro's character in Bakuman, there's also the fact that the first chapter of Death Note sees light go into a place called the Gamo Seminar. And in the Bakuman volumes you actually got to see the storyboards of both Obata and Ohba, and a lot of people, myself not included, actually think that Ohba's art in these storyboards look very reminiscent of the Lucky Man art. I'm gonna put it on screen so you can draw the conclusions for yourself, and sure, I think it definitely looks like a gag manga art, but I don't think it necessarily is especially similar to Gamo's. But there is one more hint, one not necessarily to the series in specific, but one that hints that Ohba isn't the wonder rookie that the editors claim him to be, and instead either was a previously failed mangaka or really had to try before getting Death Note published. Like I mentioned before, Ohba Tsugumi, as the name is said in Japanese, is a pun. It reads as Hobatsugumi, which means big X group or large X group. And sure, that sounds like gibberish, but it's actually an inside joke among Shonen Jump editors. Whenever an editor rejects a one-shot submission in Weekly Shonen Jump, they put it in a box with a big X on it. I'm not sure if they still do this, but back then they did. And for recurring offenders, people who got their submissions rejected over and over and over again, they would call them the Big X Group or the Ohba Tsugumi. And sure, maybe Ohba picked this name to make fun of the people in that group. The brand new rookie got famous by just one submission, but I think it's far more probable that Ohba was an Ohba Tsugumi. He got his manga rejected tons and tons and tons of time before finally hitting big with that note. And that fits the narrative of Nobuhiro. In Bakuman, he was Ohba Tsugumi, and if he represents Gamo, then Ohba is very much claiming that Gamo was part of the Ohba Tsugumi. And this was where I was going to originally end the video. I was going to add that there was no conclusive evidence to this theory. That maybe Gamo was just a friend of Ohba or Obata and they wanted to pay some homage. I mean, the glue holding this theory together is just a character from their manga. The theory didn't even exist before Bakuman. Right? That's what I thought, but I was wrong. The theory predates Bakuman. It basically predates everything. As I was discussing this video topic on my Discord server, a friend and user of the server, Cream Soda, chimed in. You see, Soda likes to check old Japanese image boards and see people's reactions to old manga as they were coming out. And they mentioned that they had come across this theory in these image boards, that it was probably there that it started. And they showed me a thread from January 2004. Someone asks who the author of that note is, and two people answer. It's Mr. Gamo. This predates Bakuman by a long shot. Bakuman is from 2009. At this point, that note was barely a month old. It had 4 chapters out. But sure, the Gamo reference was in chapter 1. Maybe that's why. It's such a massive stretch at this point, but maybe someone just saw Gamo in the chapter and they knew about the pun and they just went with the theory. And that would make sense. But this is not the first instance of this theory. We found a previous one. The oldest instance of this theory that you could find, 29th of July 2003. Someone asks who Tsugumi Ohba is. They claim nothing comes up when they search the name and they are baffled that someone without experience is paired up with Obata. The next day someone replies, Tsugumi Ohba is Hiroshi Gamo. This blew my mind completely. It broke everything that I knew about this story. This predates that note's chapter, the Gamo reference. This predates everything. The original one-shot of that note was published in August of 2003. At this point, the only public thing that people knew about Tsugumi Ohba was that in a couple of weeks they were going to publish a one-shot called That Note, and that the artist was going to be Takeshi Obata, which has just came out of Ikaru no Go. How then can someone just straight up claim that this is Hiroshi Gamo? Was it somehow public information? Was there a time before That Note was published that before they knew it was going to be the success that it was, that they didn't even try to hide Ohba's identity, that it was just some information that you could just find publicly, that they were Hiroshi Gamo? Cream Soda and I talked a little bit about possible theories, and the main theory from Soda was that somehow they had access to Ohba's birth date, and from there they would be able to figure out that it matched Gamo. And it makes sense. We know a lot of mangaka's birth date and age, even from mangaka where we know nothing else. Whenever a newbie mangaka gets published in Shonen Jump with a one-shot, they publish their birth dates in the intro for that one-shot. I was now getting dragged into a rabbit hole that I couldn't get out, and it was at this point that I started getting some replies in my original Reddit threads about the picture, with a couple of people actually worried that I was a weird stalker dude trying to find out who Tsugumi Ohba really was. But that was never the point of this video. When I started, I just wanted this to be a short video about how we know nothing about the author of one of the most popular series of all time. And here I was, just a couple days later, potentially about to uncover the birth date of someone who doesn't want to share it publicly. This was never what the video was meant to be, but at this point I really needed to know what piece of the theory I was missing. What made these people figure out before any of the clues that we have today were available? Thankfully, there was actually no birth date that we could find. It doesn't seem like Ohba put one in the intro when releasing the one-shot. Mangaka are not obligated to it, so it doesn't really mean anything, but it can also be a hint that this is someone that the editors wanted to hide. And maybe someone picked on that and ran to the possible contenders, which at this point is pretty much anyone that is alive and famous. I mean, must say that Ohba isn't a famous actor that doesn't want their manga to be associated with his movie works, or something along those lines. The other theory, which is part of another rabbit hole that I'm not getting into, at least not in this video, is that there are some Shonen Jump insiders within the Japanese image boards. We know this because there have been confirmations of cancellations and things of the sort because of these insiders. It's possible some of the people that are claiming that Ohba is Gamo were insiders that knew this because they worked with Weekly Shonen Jump. And at this point they probably thought that Death Note was going to flop, so they didn't really care. But there's also no real proof of this either. Just anonymous people talking in a Japanese image boards. However, I think I found it. The one clue that could lead people to think that Ohba and Gamo are the same person before any of the others were here. And it is, again, in the name. Tsugumi Ohba is a pun, but it can also be an anagram for Gamo Shibotu, which can also be read as Gamo Shibotsu. Grab that, put into the never reliable Google Translate, and you are given Gamo died. Just like in Bakuman. Look, let's be real, at the end of the day this is all circumstantial. Some of the hints may actually just be nothing more but a coincidence. You can choose to believe it or not. However, I think that there's too many hints here to just be a coincidence. I think Ohba is, if not Gamo himself, at least someone related to him. An apprentice, a son, a wife, someone who has seen Gamo's experience firsthand. That could even be Obata himself. Maybe Obata truly was friends with Gamo and wanted to pay homage to him while creating this new persona that would act as a writer for his manga. But part of me really wants to believe it. Not because it solves a mystery or anything, but because all of this paints a really dark picture of Gamo's future past the ending of Lucky Man. The anagram theory that we found was in a 2003 thread about Hiroshi's Gamo's death. It's hard to gauge the reactions to be genuine or not because the thread was outed as an hoax really early, but while there are some people reminiscing over their times with Lucky Man, there's also a decent number of people who just mock and don't care at all about the news. By 2003, Gamo was already a one-hit wonder bound to be forgotten as people moved to another series. And now, more than 25 years removed from his big success, Hiroshi Gamo isn't a name that we see very often, even when discussing old titles from Shonen Jump. It paints a picture very similar to Nobuhiro from Bakuman, a man who died quietly and forgotten. But he isn't irrelevant. Lucky Man got a new special edition in 2009, and the main character can be seen within the 39 playable characters that make the roster of Jumpstars Versus, which shows that there are still some love for it. I rather think that Hiroshi Gamo beat Nobuhiro's fate, that he did start again as a newbie, and within that place he found a new style, a different style of storytelling that worked. And even though it's not with the same name, he succeeded. That now is going to be remembered forever as one of the greats of Weekly Shonen Jump. But maybe it isn't. Maybe Tsugumi Ohba is just someone who just used to love to read Lucky Man a lot and wanted to pay homage to it. I don't think we'll ever know, and maybe that's for the best. Let the mystery live on. But if you want me to take a dive into another unfairly obscure Shonen Jump mangaka, you should check the video on the left about the first mangaka of the Shonen Jump magazine, Sachu Umemoto. And if you watched this here, thank you very much, and I'll see you next video.